Hi everyone, it's Mike from EduCircles, and today, as part of our Reading for Meaning series, we're going to be looking at a comprehension strategy called inferring or inferencing. Before we get into this lesson, you should know that we're going to be doing some active reading. This means that we think about the text as we read. Your brain needs to be engaged. We are actively reading instead of passively reading. Let's try to use a growth mindset here. If we work hard and do certain things, we can get better at reading. Comprehension strategies are tricks and things we can do to help us figure out the meaning of a text. Today, we're going to be talking about a comprehension strategy called inferring. Sometimes people call it inferencing or making inferences. The goal of inferring is to figure out what the text is really saying, even though the author doesn't actually say it like this. Some people call this reading between the lines. That doesn't mean we're literally reading invisible words between the printed lines of text in a book, although that would be super cool. Reading between the lines is an expression that means we look for clues and hints in what's written to figure out what a hidden meaning or what's really going on here. We make inferences all the time. When we read a book, when we chat with a stranger, when we watch the news, or when we text with our friends. Watch this video and explain what's really going on here. Did you figure out what happened even though the text didn't say it explicitly? That's called inferring. Inferring is when you take evidence from the text and you add your own thinking to figure out what's really going on. Let's take a closer look at this text message thread. Here we have screenshot number 1, and the text message is from today. The person with the blue text messages says, "Want to hang out?" and the message was read today this morning at 10:33 a.m. The person with the gray text messages says, "Sure," but then right away says, "Wait, I can't, sorry." And then the blue person just says, "K." We know that the message was delivered, but hasn't been read by the gray person yet. Okay, so let's think about this writing. It looks like the blue person wants to hang out, but the gray person can't. Maybe the gray person's really busy and can't hang out right now, but why would they say sure first? Maybe they just forgot they had something else they had to do? Now let's look at screenshot number 2. It's from yesterday in the afternoon at 2:40 p.m. and the blue person asks the gray person if they want to FaceTime, and the gray person says, "Sorry, I'm a little busy." And then the blue person right away says, that's fine. So it makes me wonder if the blue person really is okay with it. Maybe they just automatically said, that's fine, kind of how when we see people we say, how are you? And then the other person automatically says, good, how are you? But that doesn't mean that they're actually fine. And at the bottom, we can see today's message from screenshot number 1, where the blue person is asking the gray person if they want to hang out. So, I don't know. Maybe the blue person's bored and they just want to hang out. But I can also see up at the top, it says BFF as his contact name. And I know that no one's name actually has the initials BFF, although that would be super cool. So probably when the blue person was putting their friend's phone number into the contacts, instead of putting their friend's name, their first name and last name in, they probably just put in BFF because they're really good friends. So the BFF has to be the person in gray because the person on the right is the person who owns the phone. So it's like we're pretending to be the blue person here texting our BFF. But it's been twice where the best friend has said that they're too busy to hang out, which kind of seems odd if they're best friends. So maybe the blue person thinks the gray person is their BFF, but maybe the friendship is kind of one-sided. Okay, let's look at screenshot number 3. Now we can see it's from Friday, which means when it said yesterday, that must have been Saturday, which means that when it said today, that must have been Sunday. Okay, so back on Friday in the afternoon around 1 p.m., the blue person asks if they can come on over, and the gray person right away says, my mom says no. And then the blue person asks if the gray person wants to hang out at their place. And then there's no response for about an hour, and then the gray person says, sorry, can't. Okay, if I think about all 3 of these screenshots together, I know this blue person's asking a lot of times if the gray person wants to hang out, and the gray person keeps on coming up with a no. So maybe the blue person is getting tired of asking or, tired of feeling brushed aside because normally they write a full sentence or a short sentence, but on screenshot number 1, it was just a 1-letter answer, K. We also don't know what's going on with the gray person and why they said no. They said their mom said no, but if these people are in college, then maybe the gray person doesn't live with their mom, so then that would be an obvious line about not wanting to hang out. Or maybe the gray person is in grade 8, and their mom really doesn't want them to hang out with the blue person. Okay, let's look at screenshot number 4. This is from Thursday, and it's the start of all this drama. So this was the day before screenshot number 3, and the gray person is starting the conversation this time and asking the blue person if they want to hang out after dinner. And then the blue person right away says sure and suggests going to the mall, and the gray person responds right away with, "K, see you soon." And I know the gray person said it right away because there's no date stamped in the text chat. The conversation on Thursday is different from the other screenshots because it's going back and forth. So now it looks like they're actually friends as opposed to the next 3 days where it's just the blue person asking to hang out, which makes me wonder what's going on. It's Thursday night in the evening. What happened? And depending on your life experiences, your personal knowledge, and age, you might have different ideas about what happened Thursday night. There are a lot of different guesses that we can make here. Let's look at a couple of pro tips to think about when we are inferring. Pro tip number 1. Figure out what the text is really saying even though it doesn't actually say it like this in writing. That means we look for evidence from the text and we combine it with our own thinking, and together that makes an inference. It's kind of like a formula. Evidence plus thinking equals inference. It's important to note here that when we say evidence in the text, we really mean find evidence or clues in whatever we're talking about, right? So remember, we make inferences all the time, whether we're chatting with a friend in person or reading a novel or watching a movie or deciding to buy something online. And even though in this example, we're literally talking about texts, as in like text message, when we talk about finding evidence in the text, we could be looking for clues in what a person says to us, or a paragraph that an author wrote in a book, or a lyric in a song, or a line in a movie, etc. You get the idea. Pro tip number 2. Your inference cannot be directly stated in the text. So, if your inference is literally directly written in the book, then that's a direct message from the author and not an implied message or a hidden nuance that you figured out based on what the author wrote. Pro tip number 3. Sometimes when we're reading and someone asks us to make an inference, it can be really hard to come up with something on the spot. Try using the classic strategy, somebody wanted but so, to come up with something to say. Figure out a character from the text. Figure out what they wanted or what they didn't want. Figure out what went wrong or what an obstacle was. And then figure out what the person did as a result. You need to come up with all 4 parts. Let's look at some examples from our text message activity. The blue person wanted to hang out with the gray person, but the gray person was busy, so the blue person felt ditched. Here's another example. The gray person didn't want to hang out with the blue person, but they also didn't want to hurt the blue person's feelings by saying it to their face. So the gray person just lied and said they were busy or came up with another excuse. Somebody wanted but so can be about the main characters in the text, but it can also be about someone who's just mentioned in passing. So for example, the mom didn't want their kid, the gray person, to hang out with the blue person, but the gray person really wanted to hang out with their best friend, so the mom said, no, you can't hang out with the blue person. Pro tip number 4. Use the classic strategy, it says, I say, and so, to help you explain your inference or to help you come up with a new understanding. For example, it says on screenshot number 1, K, and it also says BFF, which is the contact name at the top. I say K is a really short answer for the blue person because we know blue person normally writes out complete words and sentences. And I also know that if I'm feeling a little bit off or emotional or upset, I don't really say much either. And so maybe the blue person is feeling rejected because their BFF doesn't like them anymore. Here's another example. The blue person in the text on screenshot number 3 says, can I come over? And the gray person says, my mom says no. And this happened on Friday in the afternoon at 1:18 p.m. I say that we normally have school at this time in the afternoon unless it's summer, and mom said no pretty quickly, so she's got to be nearby. The gray person wouldn't have had time to text her and then respond to the blue person because there was no timestamp between the messages. The blue person asked the question and right away the gray person says their mom says no. And so maybe this conversation took place over the summer holidays, or maybe it's during the school year and the gray person is sick at home and mom works from home. But that's probably not it because Friday afternoon, wouldn't the blue person be in class and they wouldn't just ask to come over to the gray person's house? Another example of an it says, I say, and so is, on screenshot number 4, the gray person asks the blue person on Thursday at 7:46 p.m. to see if they want to hang out after dinner. And then the next message isn't until the next day, on Friday at 1:18 p.m., when the blue person asks if they can come over. I say the gray person started texting first on Thursday, and then in the other 3 screenshots, the blue person starts the conversation first. So on Thursday, it looks like they're friends because the conversation goes back and forth. So is the mall even open at night? Do they even go to the mall? Like, what happened here? And so maybe something happened Thursday night and now the gray person is mad. Or maybe the gray person and the blue person did something and got in trouble. So now the gray person is grounded by their mom. Okay, practice time. Here's the beginning of an informational text. The title says, Building Bridges Over Dinner and a Hockey Game. Let's make an inference. Not sure where to start? No problem. Either you come up with a somebody wanted but so to say something about the text, or you come up with an it says, I say, and so to figure out something new. Let's start with an it says, I say, and so. For example, it says building bridges. I say you build a bridge to get from one side of a river to the other side. And so this doesn't make sense. Like, how do you even physically go over dinner and a hockey game? You can't just build bridges over people's houses. It's important to remember that our first inferences may not be right. At this point, we're just trying to make reasonable guesses based on the clues we have so far. So if something doesn't make sense, look for more clues in the text or try a different idea. So let's try to make a different it says, I say, and so. I say that you eat dinner, you play hockey, and sometimes you can have family friends over for dinner. And so maybe They're building bridges like some sort of popsicle stick craft or building activity. I don't know. And maybe it's like a family board game night and you're trying to build a tower and this is over dinner and the hockey game is on the TV in the background. To back this up with evidence from the text, it says building bridges over dinner. When you do an it says, I say, and so, you can start in any box. You don't have to go in order. You can also change your thinking as you get more information. Remember, we've only read the title of the article so far. Pro tip number 1 is about figuring out what the text is really saying, even though it doesn't say it like this. Remember that evidence from the text plus your own thinking equals an inference. We need clues from the text, so in this example, over dinner, and we combine that with our own thinking, like we know that we eat dinner and we know that we've had family friends over for dinner before. And so this is where the inference comes up, like maybe something happened during family board game night. Pro tip number 2 is about checking to make sure your inference isn't already directly stated in the text. It has to be something new that you figured out based on what's written in the text. So let's double check our thinking here. What we've read so far doesn't say anything about family board game night, so we're good. Okay, now, let's take a step back and come up with a somebody wanted but so to think about this text. Some friends wanted to hang out and have dinner, but it was during COVID-19 lockdown, so they can't hang out. All right, an inference is when we figure out what the text is really saying, even though it doesn't explicitly say it like that. Let's check our thinking. We have evidence from the text. It says, building bridges over dinner. And we combine that with our own thinking and ideas. So COVID-19 is fresh in my mind, and maybe this has something to do with physical distancing restrictions, like I can't hang out with my friends like I used to because of COVID-19. So we're coming up with some inferences and figuring out some possibilities about what is really going on in this informational text, even though the author hasn't come out and told us this. We also need to check to make sure our inference isn't directly stated in the text. It has to be something we figured out based on the clues and the way it was written. So in this example, it doesn't say anything in the title about friends wanting to hang out. And it also doesn't say anything about COVID-19 stopping them. So these are both inferences. Be careful. Just because we infer something doesn't mean our inference is correct. Strong inferences are supported by lots of strong evidence from text. So this text may have nothing to do with COVID-19. In fact, this text may not even be about friends. As we read, we're actively looking for more clues and evidence from the text to either support our inference or to challenge them. If the text doesn't go on to talk about COVID-19, then maybe we need to change our inferences based on the new information we get as we read. Okay, more practice. Your turn. PK Subban has been helping to build bridges between police officers and disadvantaged youth by creating opportunities for the two groups to hang out with each other in positive ways. What are 2 strategies we can use to help us make an inference? Either somebody wanted but so, or it says, I say, and so. Let's start with an it says, I say, and so. Create your own it says, I say, and so statement about this paragraph that we just read. Remember, you can start in any box. Okay, now that you've come up with your own it says, I say, and so, let's figure out what the text is really saying, even though it's not obvious. What's the formula for an inference? What do we need when we make an inference? Evidence from the text plus your own thinking equals an inference. Let's double check our work right now. Do you have a small quote or a phrase for your it says? Does this phrase come directly from the text? Did you explain what you already know from your life experience, or did you explain what you think? Finally, did you figure out something implied even though the text doesn't explicitly come out and say it like this? In other words, did you make an inference? What do we do to double check our inference? Make sure our inference is not directly in the text. It has to be something new that we figured out based on the text. Double check right now to make sure your inference isn't directly stated in the text. Be careful. Remember that as we read, we're looking for more clues from the text to support or refute our inferences here. Here's the next paragraph. Is there something here that supports the inferences you made earlier? Is there anything here that suggests a different idea, especially when you combine it with things that we read earlier in the article? Subban plays defense for the New Jersey Devils. Every home game, he hosts 4 guests to a nice dinner and great seats to watch his team play hockey. He's a great host and chats with his guests before and after the game night. Let's review inferring as a reading comprehension strategy. Pro tip number 1. Figure out what the text is really saying even though it doesn't come out and say it like this. Remember that evidence from the text plus your own thinking equals an inference. Pro tip number 2. Your inference cannot be stated directly in the text. It has to be something new that you figured out based on the text, so something implied by the text. Pro tip number 3. Use the strategy somebody wanted but so to help you say something about the text. Pro tip number 4. Use the strategy it says, I say, and so to figure out something new. Reading for meaning is one of the many strategies and skills that we use when we read. We don't know what tomorrow will look like. Reading and understanding the implications of things is an important skill to help us survive and thrive in today's changing world. One thing that will help us get through today's reading challenges and tomorrow's tough obstacles is our character. One way to work on character is to try to shift into a growth mindset. This means putting in the work, trying different strategies when we get stuck, and learning from our mistakes. So, struggling through a text, reading for deeper meaning, and reflecting on the strategies we use is an opportunity for us to develop character. Well, that's the end of this video. Teachers, if you're looking for the slideshow or handouts that go with this lesson, or for more information about reading strategies or 21st century learning, please visit us at educircles.org. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.